Hello, Garland Nixon here with Andrei Martyanov and Scott Ritter. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Big things going on. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Scott Ritter and Andrei Martyanov. Go to scottritter.com for all of Scott's good work. And of course, Smoothie X12 is the YouTube, the great YouTube page for Andrei Martyanov. Never miss one there. You learn a lot of technical stuff and have a lot of fun. All right, guys. Interesting things going on. Andrei, let's start with you. I've been trying to dig up what happened in Iran. I'm listening to Alistair Crook today. And as I understand it, the Israelis had a bunch of F-35s. Of course, the U.S. was involved. They were approaching Iran. As he says it, the first wave was supposed to suppress the air defense, and then the others were going to attack targets. Things didn't work out so well. Apparently, these so-called stealth aircrafts were getting locked on, and they threw a couple missiles and got the hell out of Dodge. What do you know about this? Your thoughts on the attempt by Israel and the U.S. to fire on Iran that seems to have, shall we say, gone awry?
Well, Iran had the benefit of, we know this for sure, a Russian early warning. Russians control the airspace there, especially, and not just by the means of the, let's say, satellites or AWACS type planes, which can fly easily. You have to look up if there was any A-50 flying in the area of the southern Caspian Sea, along the Mazandaran coastal line. But so they knew. Okay, so it's easy. Then you have obviously the Khmeimim Air Base, which touches quite a bit. Let's put it this way: Russians control all airspace of Israel. Okay, from Khmeimim. So they knew it. And obviously Russia warned Iran. But the point is, this beautiful word SEAD, suppression of enemy air defense, yes, it has been stated by many people, and me included, on many occasions. There are only 4 entities in the world which produce the full spectrum of their air defense systems, from short range to long range. Well, guess what? It's obviously United States, not very good ones, but still produce. Russia, European Union, Astor family of the missiles and things like that. And of course, guess what? Iran. They are China comes with them, but it's knockoffs, and Iran produces their knockoffs of the Soviet type or Russian type of earlier versions of S-300s, Buk M1s. They also have their brand new Panzers. They have S-300s and around Bushehr. So they have their own capability. And if they, got 100 planes in the air, no, you're not going to suppress Iranian air defense by this force. You need to have the sustained effort. It's as a result, we know as any kind of launch, as any kind of salvo, which of course Israel did, there are some leakers. They're called leakers. They're literally things which leak through the defenses. Some of them leaked, obviously, make no mistake. They hit their what is called the mix facility for the actually MRLS, multiple launch rocket systems. I don't think so. They have been very successful in getting into the and damaging a real missile producing technology of Iran. And as a result, we have this situation that's free for interpretation by both sides, let's put it this way. But obviously, the objective results so far, Iran is not impressed, wasn't impressed that much.
Do you think that the S-400 and or Russian electronic warfare systems were involved?
Yeah, I don't think so. S-400 was involved, but there no doubt about that. Electronic warfare was involved, and we know. Remember, a few years back, they actually intercepted their communications to one of their Global Hawk, I believe. And guess what? They intercepted. Took over the communications and landed the thing successfully in Iran. That was like wow, the moment of. So, and they do have very decent electronic warfare systems.
Scott, what have you heard? What insider info do you have? Inside baseball info do you have regarding the thwarted? I don't know if it was thwarted really, or if it just wasn't, it wasn't up to par to go up against the level of peer or better level technology.
Let's focus on something that Andrei just mentioned. It wasn't a Global Hawk. It was the RS-176. They call
Something
it
like that, yes.
Kandahar. The B-2 looking flying stealth Delta Wing drone. The Iranians, there's a story that goes back to 2006 when Israel sent in Sariyat Matkal and Egos and all these elite commando units into southern Lebanon, sort of repeating the disaster that's unfolding right now. But they were using the SINCARs, which is a frequency hopping encrypted radio system that the American military used. At that time, it was cutting edge. And the Sariyat Matkal guys were using it. And they ended up going into an ambush. And later on, when they reverse engineered it, it turned out that the Iranians had been monitoring these signals with Hezbollah, were able to reverse engineer the signals, and were able to replicate the Israeli communication system and not only track the frequencies, but also then decrypt it real time. And they had Hebrew linguists who listened to the officers and the radio operators and mimicked their voices. They knew all the codes and everything. So they got into the Israeli radio waves, encrypted frequency hopping, using Hebrew language, mimicking the voice, and they gave the code word that had the Matkal guys go early, and they walked into an ambush where they suffered tremendous casualties. Not only that, to add insult to injury, when one of the Matkal guys turned around, he came face to face with a Hezbollah guy who was kitted out better than he was, with modern night vision, all the things. The idea that the Hezbollah and Iran are a third world, military force, etc., is absurd. This is first world stuff. The Iranians, especially, while we were in Afghanistan, they had intelligence teams there the whole time, parked outside of, for instance, of Kandahar. And every day they watched the Beast of Kandahar, the RQ-176 or whatever it's called, take off, and they intercepted all the signals. They were going there, and they eventually decrypted the signals, and they were able to see how the plane takes off. And then at some point in time, the ground controller hands it off to a satellite that is being now controlled by somebody in Nevada, and they fly the mission from Nevada. And it's just all the handoff is an encrypted handshake that, two encrypted systems have to talk to each other. Boom, positive handoff. The Iranians replicated that. They were able to come up, and at the time when the ground controller turned over control, he turned it over to an Iranian who imitated the satellite and took control of the aircraft and landed it. The reason why I bring that up is the Iranians monitor everything. We've been flying F-35s, F-22s, F-15s in Afghanistan. We've been flying them in Syria, where the Iranians have sophisticated air defense capabilities and intelligence capabilities. We've been flying them the Israelis have been flying them nonstop in Lebanon. This isn't the first rodeo for the Iranians. They've been preparing for this for a long time. They have some of the most advanced engineering and weapons design capabilities imaginable. They have produced air defense systems, indigenous air defense systems that aren't just simply copies of the Russian S-300. These are air defense systems that have been specifically built to deal with F-35s, F-22s, F-15s. The Iranians are, as Andrei said, some of the most advanced in the world. So the reason why I bring that up is the Israelis are going into a fight where the Iranians know just about everything there is to know about the Israelis, and the Israelis know nothing about the Iranian capabilities because they haven't gone up against them. And so Israel was behind the Powerball, the power curve from the very get-go. Iran, had advanced queuing from the Russians. They probably had Russian systems that were providing some sort of intelligence, but they have their own extremely capable systems. And again, as I pointed out, the reason why I brought up the Saryat Matkal ambush in 2006 is that the Iranians have been studying the Israeli way of war, and they can anticipate. And so when the Israelis made a decision that they were going to go through Jordan, fly through Western Iraq, and go to Salahuddin, north of Baghdad, for their weapons release area, the Iranians had anticipated this, and they were locking on to F-35s. And the Israelis were going, this can't happen. How can you lock? We're not even in Iran, and you're locking on to us. How are you doing this? Well, it's because Iran has been preparing for this fight for a very long time. And the lack of, again, as Andrei said, leakers will happen. It happens everywhere. I mean, it's just the reality of war. Nothing works perfect all the time. But the Israelis didn't achieve the results they were hoping to. This was supposed to be one of those deterrence establishing strikes. Instead, what it was an impotence exposing strike, where basically Israel showed the Iranians that at least with what they were using on this strike, they can't deliver the knockout blow. And Iran showed Israel that if you want to do this, we have the solution to your problem. And this is the reality. The Israelis did not deliver anything that was as impressive as they were hoping to deliver. And the Iranians were far more impressive than the Western media is giving them credit for.
Do not forget also the very interesting thing, which is documented. It is official in many respects. It's buttressed by the American side, but Russians are in the open about it. The Su-35s, which fly, and I believe the Su-57 sometimes participated, which fly from Khmeimim Air Base in Syria, they have no problems of detecting F-35s and F-22s. In fact, is they even, were engaged in the mutual locking of their weapons on each other. So Americans lock on, to show that, and it's called SPO, passive detection system, screams like you lock on them. But the point is their signature, the portrait of all those stealth planes is nothing secret. Russians track them, detect them all the time. So it's so in this respect, Iran had everything they needed, as Scott correctly stated. They are ready to lock on and track and develop firing solution if need be. So it's probably was shocker for those guys, but again, they never gave report to this mysterious F-35, which encountered for some reason the flock of birds, for some reason slightly deep into Syrian territory, and this plane has never been exposed again, But for some reason, Syrian air defense locked on and launched precisely that moment when this F-35 of Israeli forces encountered this flock of whatever, seagulls. They launched good old S-200, which is like ancient air defense complex, How they were dealing with the, data fusion there, I don't know. We can only speculate. But since then, this plane never was shown, or like, oh, here it's encountered flock of seagulls, whatever, So, and how to put it politely, yeah, that's the how to say it, technological paradigm has changed. There's no such thing as stealth anymore. Everything is detected, everything's tracked. and especially when you have the modern signal processing systems and data fusion capabilities, which allow you to basically extract all necessary, discrete, frequencies, and okay, here it is, and there you go.
Let me ask you this, Andrei, before we go on, because one of the things we've talked about is S-400, and everything I read online says, this is the finest anti-air defense system, individual air defense system. Certainly, it works in an environment where it's a network system, integrated into a network, and that's the real strength of it. What is it about the S-400? I mean, if they're with the Iranian systems, and don't get me wrong, if they have S-300 or S-300 knockoff, it's probably better than anything, it's better than
they're really good knockoffs. Okay, let's put it. Yeah, Scott, absolutely correct. They add their own thing there. They add their own twists, which are obviously related to their environment. Do not forget that we're talking about the environment, which is specific climate. Climate matters. What is called a radio permeability matters. And for example, in the northern altitudes, in the latitudes, if you wish, you have very often what's called air defense ducts, the radar ducts, which allow you to see way beyond what is usually, and they occur, those ducts, atmospheric ducts, very often. For example, in the southern climate, which is, and of course, Iran has a desert and mountainous climate. Sometimes they record it. At some point of time, I remember the hottest temperature in the world. They had such high temperature. It's completely different. You have to adjust also for the what's called radar permeability of the atmosphere and all kinds of other things. So they worked on this. They know what they're doing.
Wow. So, Scott, your thoughts on how that changes the geopolitics of conflict, the geopolitics of diplomacy, in that now the world looks, everybody's looking, China's looking, everybody's looking. The NATO countries, people may not want to admit it, but if you're a NATO country and they're selling you these 150 million F-35s, and you're buying a bunch of them, and they're telling you, well, if we get in a dust up with Russia, don't worry, the F-35 will go right to Moscow and never get touched, etc. The rest of the world's looking at this dynamic saying, holy crap, this is Iran. And they just, ran you couldn't even attack them. You set up the attack, but you could not do it. How does that change the game as far as everybody else looking at the Western military potential versus their potential adversaries?
I don't think the F-35 was used as a penetrating strike weapon for this. I think this is the attack was done by air-launched cruise missiles, and the primary carrier for the air-launched cruise missiles are the F-15Is and the F-16Is, the Israeli modified versions. And so the F-35 was primarily a combat air patrol, basically flying the loop overhead to keep any fighters out, to keep the area clear of enemy capability. So it's not as though this was a real test of the F-35. I think getting locked on was a shock. They weren't expecting that. But the other thing I think we also have to factor in here is that the Israelis are really good. We should never, ever, ever believe that just because Iran is good, that the Israelis are bad. The Israeli Air Force especially is very technologically advanced. And I've worked with the Israeli Air Force and their planners before. These are some very clever people. I've worked with their technical intelligence branches, and they're sitting there poring over the data they collected. Believe me, everything the Iranians turned on that day was collected by the Israelis. Everything the Iranians did that day was collected by the Israelis. Everything the Iranians didn't do was collected, by default by the Israelis by failing to detect activation. So the Israelis know what the Iranians turned on, what they didn't turn on, etc. And they will adapt. So the next time around, if there is a next time around, the Israelis aren't going to repeat the same pattern of behavior. It will be a different attack plan that takes into account the lessons learned. And the Iranians, if they're as good as I believe they are realizing this, and they're adapting. They deliberately didn't show all their cards and everything like that. So it's I think, first of all, we shouldn't be talking about diplomacy, because right now diplomacy is dead. We're in a, I mean, there's a term they use. I won't use it out of respect for the audience, but it's we'll call it a big stick contest. And that's what Israel and Iran are basically engaged in right now, over the concept of deterrence. Who's got the bigger stick? And Israel was hoping to come out of this attack being able to bluff their way through, but it's not the case. Iran clearly right now has the demonstrated ability to strike Israel anytime it wants to, with whatever it wants to, and Israel does not have a reciprocal capability. There's talk about what Israel did at Parchin in other locations. I mean, I saw ridiculous things about how Israel took out all of Iran's S-300 radars. No, I don't think there's any evidence to back that up. First of all, I don't think Israel launched enough air-launched ballistic missiles to accomplish that task, even if they all hit their target. But Parchin, there's satellite imagery out there that shows strikes. I did this for a living, guys. I did it during the Gulf War. I planned the strikes against Iraq, and then I was the battle damage assessment officer who evaluated the efficacy of the strikes. Did they achieve the intended results? And then I'll give you another thing. I had the bonus of, after the war ended, being a weapons inspector on the ground, going to the sites and being able to see exactly what had been accomplished. And I will tell you that there's a world of difference between what I witnessed on the ground, what I thought I saw through overhead imagery, and what the pilots were reporting at the moment of the attack. There's Iranians who live in Tehran who, Parchin is near Tehran. Parchin's had some accidents in the past. When you're doing solid rocket propellant or explosive, and you have a bad day, it goes boom, and there's a fireball, there's an explosion, there's smoke. It's all visible. Buildings shake, windows rattle. No buildings shook or windows rattled in Tehran. So nothing of significance in Parchin was hit. The other thing is, you see these black flashes on the ground. You do know that what you're looking at is earth-covered reinforced concrete. And so if something hits it and goes boom, it literally is bouncing off the concrete. The black you see is blackened soil. It's not a penetration. It's not an explosion. It's nothing. It may look nice from a satellite photograph, but when you get on the ground, you realize that didn't even dent it. And the other thing I learned about, missile production is that the Iraqis, especially if given any sort of advance notice or indication of a strike, all the high value equipment, mixers, things of that nature, are removed from the site and taken to, different storage. And so even if you penetrated one of these mixer facilities, you didn't destroy the mixer. The mixer ain't there. The Iranians, like the Iraqis, are experts at survivability, and things can move around. So the Israelis didn't accomplish anything from this, which makes diplomacy hard. That's the problem, is that the Israelis have nothing to bring to the table right now. They don't get to tell the Iranians, you mess with us, we'll do it again. We'll do it again. The Iranians are like, and do that again? It's you wasted all your weaponry. You accomplished nothing. 100 aircraft, and they accomplished nothing. Literally next to nothing. So I think what we're seeing right now is there's a pause while both sides figure out where to go. Iran doesn't want to escalate. I know I respect Professor Morandi tremendously, and I know he's speaking of the inevitability of an Iranian response out of principle. And I'm in no position to contradict him. I'm just saying that diplomatically it makes no sense. Iran is in the catbird seat right now. They have established deterrent superiority. There's no reason for them. And Iran's coming out of a BRICS meeting in Kazan where they pledged to avoid needless escalation. That as a member of this BRICS community, they're supposed to be looking for, a peaceful resolution to these problems, and there's no reason to escalate. Right now, Israel is losing on every front. There's not a single front that Israel's winning on. And when I say losing, I'm talking about existential losing, the end of Israel kind of losing. It's not me saying this. I know there's a lot of people out there, especially in the chat. I won't mention his name, but there's one guy in particular who doesn't like my analysis. That's okay. It's an Israeli brigadier general, retired, that recently gave an interview last week. He's saying exactly the same thing I'm saying. Across the board, Israel has not accomplished any of its objectives. The Israeli military is collapsing from within. You're talking about desertion rates that are approaching 20%. 20% desertion rates. Troops are refusing to go to Lebanon because it is a death trap. Troops are committing suicide rather than returning to Gaza because they don't want to have to fight over the same terrain that they've already fought over 3 times before. They've accomplished none of their objectives. Hamas is not defeated. Hezbollah is not defeated. The Israeli economy is collapsing. $67 billion hit last year. It's going to be worse this year. Nobody's investing in Israel. Israel has lost the world. Meaning nobody supports Israel but the United States. And now the biggest thing he said is, the Israel is collapsing from within. The president of Israel, prior to October 7th, said that Israel is on the verge of a civil war because of the internal conflict. It's only worse now. Israel is a deeply divided country. It's lost its moral compass. It's lost its reason to exist. So if you're the Iranians, you've won. You have literally won. You have created the conditions for the strategic defeat of Israel. You don't have to do anything like continue to engage Israel. Just let Israel do what Israel's doing, because that is the recipe for disaster for Israel. And I think that's the direction that the Iranians are going to be heading. I personally don't believe Iran will retaliate against Israel, because there's nothing to retaliate for. It doesn't make any sense.
Nothing to be gained strategically, and they are very long-term thinkers, Iranians. They're very strategic, and the thing which obviously supports Scott's assessment, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, is the fact that usually Iran also loves the hyperbole and things of this nature, when they really want to do something to you. This time it was pretty kind of tamed, I would say, we will respond when we'll decide to on our own. Right. That's it. There was no great and smaller Satans and things of this nature. There was no this type of the rhetoric. And so Iranians are very bright people, so they will, I think so, they're not gonna retaliate. And before we go, I want to say that you can look it up. It was in Russian media as this whole thing was unfolding in Iran with Israel strikes. It was, for example, in RIA News. You can also look it up. There were reports of 5 Russian planes being in the airspace of Iran. What kind of planes? They were registering on the flight radar. So in the airspace of Iran. So make your own conclusions, okay? So as already stated, again, even their president, who definitely had to play their pro-Western part, especially urban population of Iran is highly educated. They are very liberal, if you wish, so, and there are many people pro-Western, oriented. But even he said, it's just pretty much, even us, we have to admit that, it doesn't work out with those guys. So.
Well, Andrei, I did want to jump to, so we're about halfway through. I did want to jump to what's happening on your end of the field, Kursk. Salidovo, country, major town, Salidovo apparently is fallen. I'm reading now every day, major towns in Ukraine are falling. Kursk, there's not just cauldrons forming, Ukrainian troops surrounded. Sounds like they are deep in serious trouble. Of course, we know that there's 100 million North Korean soldiers.
North Koreans out.
Right.
They're gonna
Anyway,
show them.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening on the battlefield? How bad is it, Andre? That you from your connection, from your contacts?
Well, it's so bad that even today the deputy of Syrskyi issued the warning that, and he, in no uncertain terms, he used the word collapse. The front is collapsing, and as I already stated, this operational Art 101. Russians will not move to Pokrovsk, also known as Krasnoarmeysk, actually, until the front line is even. Selidova, Kurakhova, it's all that front line. Russians are gonna finish there when they have this kind of more or less even front line, and then they will go and take Pokrovsk, as Russians now call it, Krasnoarmeysk, and Kupiansk is now, for example, it's the order for the whole population to evacuate because Kupiansk essentially is surrounded. And so, yeah, Kursk, I mean, yeah, it's a sad story for those people who planned that thing. But we know now it has been confirmed 14 brigades perished there. That's it's their second largest fubar after their famous counteroffensive, which saw well, basically 3 armies annihilated, So yeah, it's pretty bad for armed forces of Ukraine. And what can I say? Once the Oskol River is, basically forded, and yeah, there's open steps, and there was another town today in Kharkov area taken, So, and yeah, there's a constant movement to the west, but the question, as I already stated, it's not the problem. If everybody knew, who has any idea about the warfare and modern war, that it was coming one way or another. The issue is, as I already stated, strategic issue with tortures Kremlin. How much Russia have to get, and where should Russia stop, under what political conditions, for if anything remains of Ukraine. That's the dilemma, so to speak, and that's the issue, which is totally political and geopolitical, if you wish, which Kremlin has to, struggle with, because obviously we know that the majority of population of Ukraine, they are not Russophiles. Okay, let me put it this way. There are some people who are sympathetic to Russia and sympathetic to Russian cause. Some of them maybe even still identify themselves as Russians. But majority of population, they are what they want to live in, whatever the delusion has been created, the political nation of Ukraine. It happened. This nation did happen. It's not pretty. It's pretty freakish, in very many its manifestations. But they are Ukrainians. They don't want to be Russians, and you don't want those 20 or whatever 18 million people. Get them on your balance, and they will still gonna be using your benefits and everything, but still they're gonna hate you and will be ready to strike you in, stab you in the back whenever it comes down to it. So, and that's the issue which Russia is and Kremlin, obviously, they are struggling with, or maybe not, maybe they already made their mind up. And so this is the main issue. As per front, yeah, it's, as was stated many times, Russia has an right now overwhelming fire dominance and escalation dominance. It's not just numbers, it's technologically. There is virtually no air defense left on the part of the armed forces of Ukraine. It was completely suppressed, annihilated, really. So, and yeah, in many respects, like in Kursk, if you watch the videos, it's a Turkish shot primarily right now.
Scott, something I did want to ask you about, and I think it's important, and something that you have both, geopolitical and personal family connections to. Georgia.
Oh gosh.
Georgia on my mind.
On my mind, yeah.
We see the U.S. is trying to do the usual color revolution crap, but apparently the people in Georgia don't want to go along with it. What in the heck is going on, other than me reading every other day? I guess they're going to send, what's the guy's name, Juan Guaido or something there next. I don't, that's the only thing they haven't done. What's happening with Georgia? Seems like Georgia Dream is seems to be a clean sweep.
Well,
The question, I guess, is this: is Georgia still in danger of a U.S. led overthrow? Are they out of the woods? What are your thoughts on all of that?
well, I mean, there's always a danger of nefarious activity. I will say this: the Georgian government is far more prepared for what's about to happen than the Ukrainian government was in 2014. Yanukovych was taken completely by surprise by what transpired, and he was not prepared at all to deal with the consequences. And to some extent, Russia likewise was taken by surprise by the violence, and gave Yanukovych bad advice on how to deal. The solution to the Maidan in 2014 was decisive violent intervention, to kill 100, 200, 300 of these right sector Nazis, to brutally destroy them and crush them, and then take the hit from the EU, but the EU wouldn't be able to do anything, because the EU wasn't organized, structured, prepared to respond in this way. But instead, he was told, don't arm the riot police, don't provoke the EU, and the end result was he was routed. And then, by the time Russia recovered and got the upper hand over the Ukrainian military, Russia was still confused, and that's when when France and Germany came in and recommended a ceasefire and Minsk Accords and all this. Putin went along with it, and he admits today that's one of the greatest mistakes he ever did. He should have just destroyed the Ukrainian army and gotten it over with, but he believed that there was sincerity for a peace effort. The Georgian government, the Georgian Dream government, the Georgian Dream Party is the brainchild of Bidzina Ivanishvili, a billionaire Georgian businessman with deep connections to Russia, but also a man who is not opposed to close relations with the West, but somebody who said that he understands the reality of Georgia's geopolitical positioning. Georgia is not a European nation. Georgia is not meant to be a NATO nation, and Georgia Dream knows this. They've tried to walk the middle ground, but in the end, they understood, especially after February 2022, that Georgia was not going to be a nation that's going to set up a second front to play the Western game, etc. If you take a look, Georgia refused to participate in the economic sanctions. Two of the strongest years of economic growth for Russia are 2023 and 2024. Why? Because Georgia's trading with Russia, and they're experiencing 10.3, 11, 12% growth, and it's projected to continue that way. Georgia knows where its bread is buttered. The Georgian Dream government rightfully identified the major problem facing Georgia as the Western funding of these non-governmental organizations, and shut it down. The brilliant way in which they passed this law, because they did this, they did an initial run at it, and they backed down because the West mobilized. But Georgia Dream simply, that was tickling to get intelligence to see how everybody's going to react. They identified all the players, everybody they need to know about. So when they rolled in the second time, they had them outflanked from the very beginning. The opposition never had a chance. Georgia Dream was able to come in. They had the votes. They had the votes counted. They knew the president would seek to veto. They had the votes to override it. They did everything procedurally just right, so there's no constitutional issues. They got the law passed, and they neutered, emasculated the opposition going into this election. And Georgia Dream won a convincing election. This is a free and fair election. There's no cheating going on. And there's no evidence of cheating. There's no evidence of Russian involvement. I will say this, that the Russians appear to have been negotiating with Georgia Dream behind the scenes, saying if you stay out of this war, and we're not telling you can't be part of EU, we're saying you can't be part of NATO, but if you show that you can be a responsible neighbor, the door is open for serious talks about Abkhazia and South Ossetia. putting those on the table and seeing if we can bring. And that's what the Georgians want more than anything. They want their nation to be, reunited. Whether it's some sort of federalist structure, however it's done, I don't know, because you're never going to go all the way back. Abkhazia will always have a significant level of autonomy. Same with especially South Ossetia, where the population is the majority. Abkhazia, there's still the minority there. But the bottom line is we're talking about a Georgia that now has returned its territorial integrity. And which direction is Georgia going to go? Georgia Dreams played this perfectly. They're not the ones that are saying we must leave the West. They had a fair and free election. Georgia Dream won this election. There's no doubt. Even the president of Georgia, this French diplomat turned
Zorabishvili, Salome Zorabishvili.
She says there's no evidence that Russia interfered, but we know Russia did. Well, how? Because the outcome isn't what we wanted. But we do this. The Georgian Dream, they let the opposition have their demonstrations. And then what they would do is they would have a day of the family. And what happened? All the Georgians came down from the mountains and came up from the valleys and closed in on Tbilisi. And, the opposition was showing Tbilisi streets filled with the EU waving, Ukrainian flag waving, American flag waving crowds. And then the next day, 10 times that size came walking in the Georgians, the real Georgian people from Georgia, waving the Georgian flags. And all they did is they made their presence known because they said, this is Georgia, not you fake Western wannabes who hang out in the cafes in Tbilisi and drink your lattes and your cappuccinos and all this. The real Georgians who,
don't touch lattes. I drink lattes 3 times a day.
I'm
not opposition. I'm all for it.
But you drink cha-cha and eat Kinkali. That's the thing. You got to twist the top off the Kinkali, suck the juice out, and pop it in your mouth. If you can do that and drink cha-cha while you're doing it, you're a real Georgian. But my point is, Georgia Dreams backed by real Georgia. And real Georgia spoke on election day, and they won. And now what the United States is doing is making it so easy for Georgia Dream to make the next move. Georgia Dream is going to let these protests peter out. They're going to go through all the constitutional challenges. And then I believe you're going to see them remove the president. The president has committed treason, is committing treason, is violating the Constitution as we speak. So she will be impeached and removed. Ivanishvili may be the next president of Georgia. And then you're going to see diplomatic relations restored with Russia. And you're going to see Georgia make the decision that just like Serbia or just like Turkey, the EU doesn't want us because it's not Georgia that's rejecting the EU. It's the EU rejecting Georgia. It's not Georgia rejecting the United States. It's the United States rejecting Georgia. And Georgia will do what is natural, which is Georgia is going to pivot to Russia, pivot to BRICS, and pivot east. And the West will have lost Georgia. And the good news is Georgia won't have lost a single person doing this. Their economy will be intact. Georgia's making the smartest move possible. This is the best thing in the world for the free and sovereign state of Georgia. I wish they could have been friends with the United States. I wish they could have. But the United States is incapable of being friends with anybody. We have to dictate outcomes. The irony of the United States at this point in time in our history, when we're having an election where we're screaming about interference, Georgia held an election that's cleaner than any election America will ever pull off, where the results are quite clear, crystal clear about the intent of the Georgian people, the will of the Georgian people expressed in democratic fashion. And we're saying no to that. We're saying that we reject that outcome. We're exposing ourselves as the biggest hypocrites when it comes to democratic principles that the world has ever seen.
Thoughts on Georgia? Did you have any thoughts on Georgia, Andrei?
No, I mean, Scott has really ties there, and I have friends, obviously. I have classmates who are Georgians, actually. So I've been to Georgia many times. I've been to Abkhazia many times. It's a separate story what Abkhazia is, and Scott correctly stated one very important thing. While I doubt about Ossetia, but in terms of Abkhazia, there is a reason Russia doesn't want Abkhazia as it happened, for example, with the Donbas republics, which became the part of Russian Federation. Abkhazia is held there as a both bargaining chips, and actually, Abkhazians, many of them, they don't like Russians. Make no mistake, they don't like anybody. They like only themselves, So I've been there. So all kinds of things were happening there, especially if you look attentively at where the 18th Brigade was located, or 6th. No, it was 18th, I believe, in Achimchira. It's not a pleasant tropical climate. You cannot have the wallpaper. You know why? It's gonna get unstuck because of the humidity there. It's horrible, honestly, in this respect. So other than that, Scott is absolutely correct. I mean, there is a pragmatic, so to speak, consensus in Russian and Georgian relations now. And they know that they will reap the benefits of being essentially neutral in their choices. And that's what is happening right now. So, and we'll see. I don't know.
Let me ask you this, Andrei. What are your thoughts on all of this foolishness? I mean, here's what I'm seeing everywhere. Oh, North Korean soldiers are there. Oh, it's international. I mean, all this, like, for some reason, the U.S. government, NATO, decided that they're going to run with this. There's North Koreans all over the place. I mean, maybe it's that when they lose, they can then say, well, the North Koreans came in. They would have never won. The Russians were losing, and they were, of course, they're fighting the troubles. How could they possibly win? But that the North Koreans came in and bailed out the weak Russian army. Or there's like some kind of a PR narrative behind it, because it doesn't make sense.
Well, it actually doesn't make sense for anybody who has a common sense. It makes total sense for people in Washington, for example. As you correctly stated, their favorite shtick is that Russians are weak, they are backward, and you know what? In some quarters in Washington, Russians are viewed as subhumans. I can tell you, James Clapper, for example, and his people, they view Russians as, the Nazi Germans view, the Slavic Untermensch, and so things of this nature. So they cannot live with the situation that, as I already stated many times, not only Russia won the war already, and it won the war not with Ukraine. There was never a question about that Russia will beat Ukraine into bloody pulp. It's what happened. Russia won a NATO war, okay? Up to the point that right now it's confirmed, even on tactical level. That means level of companies, level of battalions, level of even regiments and brigades. The NATO officers are handling that. They are really commanding it. They conduct full-blown command and control. So, and suddenly you have this basically thing, which is, you're failing. Everybody knows that all those operation planning was done in Ramstein. Everybody knows it. It's no secret. Suddenly you have this downer. Of course, that must be North Koreans. This mighty North Korean. Mighty North Korean troops, which have to turn the tide. Ukraine was winning so well, and then suddenly, bang! Yeah, that's what it is. It's cheap PR. There's nothing left in their, arsenal anymore other than spinning. Period. Listen, it's and again, what can I say? Their Western advisors are being killed actually almost on a daily basis. Just yesterday, there was the visit from Mr. Iskander to one of the facility, and near Kharkov. Well, guess what? Some people were visiting there. That was immediately cordoned off the place of the impact. Special emergency vehicles, and the medical help was there. So that tells you something, and what can I say? It's very, unpleasant. Make no mistake. I know it's very unpleasant to lose. But when you lose that big with the geopolitical global implications and ramifications of all that, of course, what's left? Let's spin things. Dan Sandler, just to give you an example, today, New York Times, and yesterday too, number of pieces, they suddenly recognized the atrocity against civilians in Kursk. Wow, Even the fact that you couldn't have done this even half a year ago, to say that Russian people are being, raped, killed, So, and then suddenly New York Times comes out. It's obviously too late for them to salvage whatever was left of their reputation. But even they admit now that the civilian people have been completely, I mean, it's just all violation of any rules of war, any Geneva Convention, and well, yeah. So, and they associated themselves with these people. These are people, you have the videos of Russian POWs being tortured. That's what they do. I mean, the guys Russia exchanges in like POWs, you won't believe what they were doing to them. I don't want to say things here, so, but
Right,
this is
yeah.
absolutely, it's it would impress even Gestapo what have been done to those people, It's like from this story, he was fired from Gestapo for cruelty. This is what
You're right.
This is exactly what is happening. And then suddenly they begin to expose it a little bit by a little bit. I mean, that's the people. You created these people. You planned for them. You gave them weapons. You supported this whole idea. And then suddenly you begin to recognize that essentially what happened, and, too late. Too late. And those people, they know the election's coming. We probably know the real, with a great deal of certainty, we can say that Trump leads in polls. There's no doubt about it, So, and after the talks of Trump and J.D. Vance, about this essentially, how to put it, common sense foreign policy, which of course by default means what? The end of the Ukraine adventure. There are many people in Washington who are really afraid. That's as much as I can say. I'm really happy to be on the opposite coast from that town. Okay, so albeit in Washington still, but I love my Washington state.
Scott, last thing. So I've been, I read a lot of Israeli media. I look a lot online. It appears to me, from everything that I read, that the Israelis are taking a much worse beating on the Hezbollah border than is being led on here. I'm reading now that, hardcore Israeli Zionist leaders are starting to say things like, we need to perhaps find a way out here. Maybe, they're starting to mumble things about, looking for an off ramp that I believe they'll only do if they're taking a licking. I've seen numbers. I saw a number today of 2,600 casualties since the beginning of the incursion. But everything I read, all the lights are blinking red that the Israelis are taking it bad in Lebanon, which, as could be predicted, how did they get out of this one? Are you hearing the same thing? I mean, to me, it would be inevitable, because I saw a video today that seemed to be reasonable. These guys were running and literally crying Israeli soldiers.
Yeah, I saw that video. I think that was a military exercise with a soundtrack superimposed on it. I don't think that was actual combat footage of the Israelis. So I think that's part of the dark propaganda that exists on social media now. But the fact of the matter is this. The Israelis had briefed to themselves that by this phase they believe their own propaganda. That's one of the problems here when you politicize intelligence. So they were told that if we kill Nasrallah, we disrupt the senior leadership. If we run this magic pager attack against their middle management, we will demoralize them, create chaos, and we will paralyze their ability to resist. And if we come in decisively and move, we can basically take 100-kilometer line, advance 20 kilometers deep, push Hezbollah out of this area, and therefore create a buffer that secures northern Israel. We will repopulate the north with the 60,000 evacuated settlers and declare victory. And in doing so, we'll have dealt a strategic defeat to Hezbollah. This was the goal. This was the objective. They've accomplished none of that, not even close. I think the deepest penetration they've made is a couple of kilometers. Last night, they attempted a major push on a strategic hill. They got their proverbial asses kicked. They were pushed off the hill. They went into a valley to regroup. That valley was a pre-designated ambush spot where Hezbollah rained death and destruction on them. They had to pull back into areas. They're struggling to get the evacuations out. And this is repeated over and over again. There's a reason why up to 20% of the Israeli reservists are refusing to report for duty for southern Lebanon, because they know it's a death trap. Hezbollah has not been defeated. Hezbollah has not been thrown into chaos. Hezbollah is operating off of very detailed defensive preparations that are 16 years in the making. Every square inch of southern Lebanon has been mapped out by Hezbollah, and they have pre-designated weaponry already located, ready to rain death and destruction. Now, the Israelis, of course, they get a vote. They've destroyed certain things. Their special forces have gone in and nullified this and nullified that. Good. You get to advance 100 yards. Good job, Israel. Now go advance the next 100 yards. Because now you're going to say, oh, we're on a roll. You move the next 100 yards. You haven't taken out the weapon systems that are zeroed in, and now you're dying. And now you're trying to adjust. And so you move into this wadi thinking that you have cover because that's what the map says. But Hezbollah's looked at the same map from your perspective, saying this is where they're probably going to withdraw. Boom, boom, boom. IEDs go off. More mortars come down. This is the reality. Israel's moved into a hornet's nest, and it's kicking their ass. They are losing casualties like you wouldn't believe. Wounded, huge numbers of wounded. But a large number of dead as well, and including some of their most elite units. The EGOZ unit, EGOZ, was created to fight in this very fight. They're the elite commandos designed to take on Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and they're getting slaughtered because Hezbollah is 10 times better than they will ever be, because Hezbollah is ready for this. This is the reality. Israel can't touch Hezbollah. Hezbollah is crushing Israel. And mark my words, when this is all said and done, and Israel tries to disengage, Hezbollah will take the fight to northern Israel. And you're going to see Hezbollah occupying Israeli towns, Israeli villages. This is something Hezbollah has promised to do if Israel wants a full-scale war, and Israel has made a mistake. They've strategically engaged Hezbollah. So I wouldn't be surprised, but by the time this is done, there will be significant chunks of Israeli territory under Hezbollah control. Meanwhile, Hezbollah will continue to rain death and destruction down on Israeli settlements, on Haifa. Rather than having 60,000 settlers return to the north, Israel's had to evacuate tens of thousands of additional settlers because life has become unlivable. This is a disaster for Netanyahu, an absolute disaster, and they don't have a solution. They can't double down on stupid because all it does is get more people killed. The Israeli nation is demoralized, absolutely demoralized. Every time the air raid sirens go off and they have to run to their shelters, that's proof positive that Netanyahu has failed in his effort to subdue Hezbollah. And the constant stream of casualties coming out of southern Lebanon proves that Hezbollah is not only not defeated, but has the upper hand. And the death blow to Israel will be when they try to withdraw from Lebanon and Hezbollah follows them into northern Israel. When Kiryat Shimona has the yellow and green flag of Hezbollah flying over it, this will be a very bad day for Israel. But it's a distinct possibility because Hezbollah is not defeated. Hezbollah is winning this fight.
Andrei, one last thing, and that is, it seems to me that the U.S. has been flying over, bombing olive growers for a long time. They picked two fights on the ground, one against Russia that nobody ever wins, and the other one, the Israelis, who again are Western trained fighters. It seems to me that the ground fighting, the land fighting techniques, well, for one thing, they're so casualty averse, but they pick two fights that they can't win, and it seems like almost simultaneously they're going to get their ass handed to them, losing two wars. Anyway, your thoughts on that, Andrei?
Even The Economist, which is the herald of the establishment, it's Anglo-American essentially. It's a British magazine, but it's run by an American lady with degree in nothing, but still, And they even say, and they pronounce today, and I just read, basically the news on the Russian side. And Pentagon says, yeah, we're down to what we cannot touch. We're essentially on the untouchable stocks of the ammunition and everything. And the United States simply has nothing to give to Ukraine. That was already stated. That's why actually Austin flew in to tell them it's over, guys. That's done, because they can give some money, but in terms of the material support, in terms of the critical weapons such as ammunition, things like tanks, it's over, it's done, it's closed. And so as the result, United States always lucky of sitting behind the two oceans and not experiencing the beauty, quote unquote, I am obviously being facetious, of the continental warfare. And continental warfare is horrible, especially for people who are on the continent, because whatever you do, the best you can always do is evacuate somewhere, but you still lose your home, your property. Sometimes when you evacuate, you are killed, and things of this nature. United States didn't experience anything like this since 1861, 1865. And even then, only on the eastern seaboard. San Francisco was doing quite well, during the Civil War. It was a very lovely town at that time. So, and just to United States thinks that it can go behind the, sit out behind the two oceans. But the problem is, we're living in the 21st century. We're living in the world of the social media. Not rumors, but information about this catastrophe is not really secret anymore. You could control narratives, and even during the electronic media, you had what, ABC, NBC, and whatever, and we all, remember who was that? What's his name?
Mike Wallace, or
no, the other guy went to during that offensive, made shoot the, in ABC, I believe. And
Peter Jennings.
Who?
Peter Jennings.
No, the other guy, not Dan Rather, somebody else. So anyhow, they showed this, that offensive results. All the United States repelled it, but still, at what cost? And suddenly, oh my God, nobody wants to fight the war in Vietnam. This is different today, because essentially everybody who wants to, they know the outcomes, and of course they spread instantly around the world. So some guy in Malaysia, if he wants to know what is going on, he can go, and nobody believes anymore the American legacy media. I saw the poll by Pew Research, no less, and Gallup, only 31% of Americans believe in the legacy media. The rest, hey, praise to Americans. That's what sets America apart from Europeans. Those guys are brainwashed. But the majority of Americans don't believe the mainstream media, legacy media. They go out on the other outlets, alternative media, and they find out what is happening. And actually, what we see a delayed, even what we have right now within the United States, which is a complete mess, especially before the election day. What we see, those are delayed reactions on the geopolitical, catastrophe for the United States. Simple as that, because it begins to reflect itself also in the economic field. It begins, look at, only it takes Biden to come up and say that he did really well economically for the United States. It's like, really? People can see it. That's why it's different. You applaud Americans because they don't take this crap from mainstream media, except for the older boomers, which, by the way, is primarily the Israeli firsters. This is the main demographics, which is the Israeli firsters, and those people who are Christian Zionists, who are the power behind the influence of the Israeli lobby in the United States. But it's shrinking every day. In Europe, it's different. They really believe this garbage, So, and not all, but on much different, shares, much different proportions. And so, United States facing this, it's geopolitical defeat of the not century, of the half millennia. And so what are you going to do after this? And I agree with Scott. United States should have been, if it could have had a real statesman, do something about it and say, come to Russia and China and say, okay, let's sit, let's talk, and obviously we're not going to be the part of BRICS, but we can rearrange things and find modus vivendi, okay? It's about modus vivendi. These guys, all those people in Washington who never experienced any difficulty in their lives, except for choosing between Harvard and whatever, Yale, okay? Yeah, that's who won't run 7-Eleven store to bankruptcy in 3 days. These are all those people, those Ivy League people who have no clue about the real world. They have been taught the lesson. When I look at the Jake Sullivan, he's a boy, okay? Put him in the goddamn boot camp, and see how he's gonna do there. Let alone get him into, for crying out loud, get him into some operational rooms in Pentagon where those, colonels and brigadier generals, not these BSs with the big stars, but the guys who know what they're doing, let him show how their planning goes, what numbers are going, how he has no clue. He has no clue. He has no clue about his home country. How do you think he has a clue about Russia? I wrote my last book, actually explores this whole Russian study field and Russian experts. None of them will even dare to talk to me because they know they will have something like imbecile like Michael McFaul. The guy cannot speak even proper Russian, for crying out loud. Guess what? He is expert. He is the guy who contributed to that. So there you go.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Everybody go to scottritter.com for follow all of Scott's work, and make sure when you're there, you donate. Also, Andrei Martyanov Smoothie X12. That's the that is the YouTube, and of course that's also his blog spot, and you can become a patron, and of course my info is there for Patreon, and if you want to donate, everything that's going across the bottom is good there. I'm not on Sputnik anymore, but they've screwed up now because I'm on YouTube more. So you can't shut down the signal, if they said in one of my favorite movies, Serenity. All right, thanks a lot, guys. Everyone, share this on all your social media platforms. It is critical. This stuff gets shadow banned. They do everything they can to shut it down. Share it everywhere you can. Make sure you follow me on Rockfin. You follow me on Rumble, because they could throw me off here on any given day. Thanks a lot, guys. Everybody, we're out. All right, Scott.